My son called me his maid at his wedding, but I made him regret it in front of everyone when the lawyer arrived. The grand ballroom of the Beaumont Hotel shimmered under the opulent chandeliers, a breathtaking display of crystal and gold that seemed to hold the very essence of wealth and aspiration. Every surface, from the polished marble floors reflecting the soft glow of hundreds of candles, to the towering floral arrangements cascading with rare orchids and white roses, spoke of lavish expenditure. This was Kaylin and Seraphina's wedding, a spectacle designed to impress, a testament to their exquisite taste, or more accurately, Ilara's bottomless financial well. 72-year-old Ilara, a widow and the matriarch of what was once a proud, loving family, sat quietly at a table tucked away near the back. Her placement was strategic, a subtle nudge from Seraphina, out of the direct line of sight from the head table, yet still visible enough to signal her necessary, if understated, presence to those who might inquire. Her silk gown, a deep sapphire blue, a cherished gift from her late husband, Dragan, was elegant but understated, its classic lines a stark contrast to the flamboyant, often revealing, attire of the other guests, all of whom seemed to be vying for a prominent spot on the society pages. Ilara watched them with a quiet, observant gaze, a lifetime of understanding human vanity etched subtly around her kind eyes. A well-meaning guest, a distant cousin of Seraphina's whom Ilara had never met, approached her table with a friendly smile, her expensive champagne flute tinkling softly. "Excuse me," the guest began, her voice a pleasant lilt, a gentle murmur against the backdrop of the jazz band. "I just wanted to compliment you on how beautifully everything has been arranged. The flowers, the lighting, it's all so tasteful. You must be Kaylin's wedding planner, or perhaps his assistant. The attention to detail is just remarkable." A polite, almost imperceptible twitch played at the corner of Ilara's lips. A strange, bitter amusement stirred within her. She had, in fact, paid for every single rose, every shimmering crystal that adorned the tables, every culinary masterpiece that graced the buffet. She had even quietly settled a last-minute dispute with the caterer just an hour before the ceremony began, an unexpected issue with the imported oysters that only she had the foresight and funds to resolve. The guest's assumption, while innocent in its intent, struck a deep, resonant chord within Ilara's long-suffering heart. It was a mirror reflecting the truth of her perceived role. Before Ilara could formulate a gracious response, a booming voice cut through the air, laced with a familiar, condescending amusement that made her inner self flinch. "Oh, no, no, she's not the planner." Kaylin, Ilara's 50-year-old son, strode towards them, a glass of champagne in hand, his face flushed with drink and self-importance. His new wife, Seraphina, trailed elegantly behind him, her eyes already scanning the room for more important connections, a faint, predatory gleam in their depths. Kaylin's face broadened into a theatrical grin, a mask of jovial condescension. "That's just Ilara, my mother's assistant. She helps out with things around the house, manages some of the older family affairs. Quite useful, really, for the bits we don't have time for." He chuckled, a sound that grated on Ilara's ears like nails on a chalkboard, stripping away any lingering facade of respect. "You know, the little errands. We call her our personal aide. Seraphina offered a tight, dismissive smile, her gaze already drifting, her attention clearly elsewhere. "Yes, Ilara is quite indispensable for the mundane tasks. She's been with the family for ages." The implication was clear, cutting deeper than any direct insult. Ilara was a loyal, albeit paid, fixture, a ghost in the grand machinery of their lives, a mere utility. The guest's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of awkwardness as she quickly mumbled an apology and retreated, sensing the social faux pas, a sudden chill in the air around Ilara's table. Ilara watched her go, a strange, profound stillness settling over her, a quiet storm brewing beneath her calm exterior. The clinking of glasses, the murmur of happy conversations, the joyous laughter of her grandchildren, all faded into a distant, muffled hum, as if a thick glass wall had descended around her. Kaylin and Serafina had already turned their backs, lost in the sea of their adoring guests, oblivious to the quiet devastation they had wrought, to the irreparable damage their casual cruelty had inflicted. Ilara's heart, which had endured years of neglect and thinly veiled contempt, did not shatter. It had been chipped away at for too long to break now. Instead, it hardened, crystallizing into a resolve colder and sharper than any diamond. Her eyes, usually soft and forgiving, now held the glint of steel, a nascent fire of determination. She took a slow, deliberate sip of her lukewarm water, the taste bitter on her tongue, mingling with the acrid taste of humiliation. Personal aid, she whispered to herself, the words tasting like ash. The empire they had built on her generosity, the lavish life they flaunted so carelessly, was about to crumble. They had just lit the fuse of their own spectacular undoing, completely unaware that the quiet woman in the silk gown was not merely an aid, but the architect of their very existence. And she had just decided to sign their eviction notice. To understand the profound sting of Kaylin's words, one had to understand the labyrinthine tapestry of Ilara's life, woven with threads of unconditional love and, tragically, unrequited sacrifice. When Dragan, her beloved husband, passed away a decade prior, he left behind not just a legacy of technological innovation but also a substantial fortune, built on groundbreaking patents in sustainable energy and shrewd investments in emerging tech. Dragan had been a visionary, a man who saw the future and invested in it with remarkable foresight, leaving Ilara the sole beneficiary of an estate vast enough to ensure comfort for generations. But for Ilara, true wealth was never measured in zeros on a bank statement. It was measured in the warmth of family, the genuine laughter of her children, and the quiet respect of those she held dear. Dragan had often reminded her that money was a tool, not a measure of worth, a lesson Ilara had absorbed deeply, perhaps too deeply when it came to her son. From the moment Kaylin and Serafina entered her life, Ilara had opened her heart and her purse strings without hesitation. Kaylin, her only son, had always possessed a certain superficial charm, a quick wit that masked a deeper lack of substance. But it was coupled with an equally potent, almost innate, sense of entitlement. He had never truly learned the value of hard work, having inherited a comfortable life and, later, the expectation of Ilara's unending support. His early ventures, small and ill-conceived, had always fizzled out, often leaving Ilara to quietly cover the resulting debts. Serafina, with her sharp wit and even sharper social ambition, quickly understood the dynamics at play. Ilara wasn't just a mother-in-law, she was a resource, a bottomless well of financial aid that could fuel their ascendant lifestyle, a stepping stone to the elite social circles they desperately craved. Their first significant request came just a year after Dragan's passing. Kaylin and Serafina, living in a modest suburban home that Ilara had paid the down payment for years prior, declared their need for a larger, more prestigious residence. It was, they insisted, essential to reflect Kaylin's burgeoning career, which, in reality, involved more networking lunches at expensive clubs than actual productive work, a fact Ilara knew but chose to ignore. They found a sprawling 5-bedroom house in the exclusive gated community of Silver Creek, a mansion with manicured lawns and a 3-car garage, far beyond their means. Ilara, wanting to see her son happy and believing, perhaps naively, in their future success, readily provided the substantial down payment, a sum that alone could have purchased several comfortable homes outright. "It's an investment in your future, my dears," she had told them, her voice soft with affection, a hopeful tremor in her words. For years, she continued to cover their exorbitant mortgage payments, often quietly transferring funds directly to the bank without them even needing to ask, a silent stream of generosity that became their very lifeblood. The house became a grand, hollow symbol of their rising status, a status built entirely on her financial foundation, a magnificent cage built with Ilara's gold. Cars were another constant drain, a revolving door of luxury and planned obsolescence. Kaylin, a self-proclaimed connoisseur of luxury vehicles, would cycle through high-end sports cars and SUVs every few years, each new model more ostentatious than the last. There was the sleek Porsche 911 he needed for his business meetings, followed by the robust Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon that Serafina required for ferrying the grandchildren to their various elite activities. Each time, Elara would find herself writing a substantial check for the down payment, and often, for the crushing monthly lease payments and premium insurance, which she discovered Kalen would neglect if left to his own devices. She remembered one instance vividly. Kalen had casually mentioned at a family dinner, almost as an aside, that his current car was starting to feel a bit old-fashioned, and wasn't quite sending the right message anymore. By the next month, a brand new, top-of-the-line Range Rover, fully loaded with every conceivable extra, sat gleaming in their driveway, paid for entirely by Elara, who received only a perfunctory, "Thanks, Mom, you're the best," before he sped off to his golf club, leaving her to wonder when such fleeting gratitude would ever translate into genuine affection. Serafina's boutique business, a high-end fashion venture named Serafina's Chic, was perhaps the largest money pit, a gaping maw that swallowed funds with alarming regularity. Launched with much fanfare and a substantial initial investment from Elara, funds that could have established a charitable foundation, it was more a personal shopping spree disguised as an enterprise. Elara paid for the lavish storefront rent in a prime downtown location, the initial inventory of designer clothes from European fashion houses, the glossy marketing campaigns in exclusive magazines, and even the salaries of the 2 part-time assistants Serafina hired, who often found themselves running personal errands for their employer. The boutique consistently operated at a significant loss, its profits invariably funneled back into Serafina's designer wardrobe and frequent research trips to Milan and Paris, which were little more than luxurious holidays. Elara knew it was a vanity project, a desperate attempt by Serafina to carve out her own identity and social standing. Yet, she hoped it would give Serafina a sense of purpose beyond social climbing. Instead, Serafina merely saw it as another tap connected to Elara's limitless reservoir. Mother Elara, the supplier of dreams. Serafina would often quip to her friends, a statement that was meant to sound endearing but always carried a dismissive, almost mocking, undertone, as if Elara's generosity was her simple, expected function. The grandchildren, while genuinely loved by Elara with a depth that transcended their parents' superficiality, also became instruments of their parents' financial exploitation. From their earliest years, they were enrolled in the most exclusive private schools, their tuition fees astronomical, far beyond what Kalen and Serafina could ever afford. Elara paid for everything: the annual tuition, the mandatory overseas educational trips, the specialized tutors for every conceivable subject, the elite sports academies, and even the extravagant university trust funds she painstakingly established for each of them, envisioning a secure and independent future for them. She believed in giving them the best opportunities, wanting to open doors for them that she herself had not had. But Kalen and Serafina used it as an excuse to avoid any financial responsibility themselves. "They deserve the best, Mother," Kalen would say, as if this simple phrase absolved him of any parental duty to contribute, any need to earn. The grandchildren, shielded from the reality of their parents' financial dependence, grew up with an implicit understanding that Grandma Elara was simply the inexhaustible source of all good things, a benevolent, silent force that provided everything. Over the years, the disrespect morphed from subtle slights into overt disregard, each incident chipping away at Elara's patience. Family gatherings at Kalen and Serafina's opulent home became rare occurrences for Elara. She would often receive last-minute invitations, or worse, learn about events through social media posts, her presence clearly an afterthought, an obligation rather than a desire. When she did attend, she was often relegated to the background, introduced vaguely as Kalen's mother, rather than the revered matriarch, her contributions erased. Her opinions, always wise and grounded in a lifetime of experience, were brushed aside as old-fashioned or quaint, her insights deemed irrelevant in their modern, superficial world. Serafina would often make jokes about Elara's simple tastes, her preference for quiet evenings over extravagant parties, her love for classic literature over vapid reality television. Mother Elara just wouldn't understand, darling, she'd purr to Kalen, as if Elara's deep understanding of life was a weakness, a flaw. The most painful aspect was the emotional neglect, a constant, gnawing ache in Alara's soul. Holidays would pass with a perfunctory phone call or a brief text message, usually asking for something. Birthdays were often forgotten or marked by a hastily chosen gift, often something she didn't need or want. Alara yearned for genuine connection, for shared stories, for the simple comfort of being truly seen and valued for who she was, not for what she provided. She would watch, heartbroken, as Kaylin and Serafina showered expensive gifts on their friends and acquaintances, meticulously cultivating their social image, their network of influence, while she, the silent architect of their entire facade, received little more than a polite nod, an empty gesture. Just 6 months before the wedding, Alara had endured yet another particularly galling incident, a small but significant betrayal. Her precious antique porcelain vase, a delicate piece of Qing dynasty artistry that Dragan had gifted her on their 30th wedding anniversary, was accidentally shattered by one of her grandchildren during a boisterous playdate at Kaylin's house. The child, Marcus, had been running wildly indoors, heedless of his surroundings. Instead of offering a genuine apology or attempting to mend the irreplaceable heirloom, Serafina had merely shrugged, a dismissive wave of her hand. "Oh, it's just old junk, Alara. We can buy you a new, modern one. Don't worry, Kaylin will have mother pay for it." The casual cruelty of the remark, the instant, unthinking assumption that her own money would be used to replace something irreplaceable, something imbued with decades of love and memory, had been a sharp, painful jab, a wound that festered. But the wedding, the culmination of Kaylin and Serafina's social aspirations, was the ultimate stage for their disregard, the final performance of their contempt. Alara had paid for every single element, from the bespoke designer gown Serafina wore, shimmering with hand-stitched pearls, to Kaylin's custom-tailored suit that cost more than a year's salary for most people, to the multi-tiered cake that cost more than a small car. She had meticulously overseen the details she could, despite being consistently sidelined from the major decisions, her suggestions often met with condescending smiles or outright dismissal. She had believed, foolishly perhaps, that this grand occasion, this joining of families, would finally be a moment of recognition, a moment when her son and his wife would publicly acknowledge her love and sacrifice, her foundational role in their lives. Instead, she had been relegated to the status of a paid servant, an aide, a mere utility to be acknowledged only when convenient. As the wedding reception continued around her, a cacophony of shallow joy and forced laughter, Alara reflected on the decades of quiet support, the endless flow of funds, the emotional investment that had yielded so little in return. She had poured her heart and Dragan's legacy into their lives, hoping to build a foundation of love and security, a lasting family bond. Instead, they had built a gilded cage of dependence, a cage from which she, the supposed benefactor, had become the primary prisoner. The pain was no longer a dull ache, it was a searing realization that her boundless generosity had not fostered gratitude, but rather bred an insatiable, self-serving monster. And that monster, her own son, had just called her his maid in front of a room full of strangers, a public humiliation. The wellspring of Alara's patience, so deep for so long, had finally, irrevocably, run dry. The morning after the wedding, a serene, almost unnerving calm settled over Alara's elegant, yet understated, home. The air, usually filled with the ghost of Dragan's laughter or the imagined sounds of her grandchildren echoing through the quiet rooms, now held a profound silence, a heavy stillness that was nonetheless liberating. Alara rose with the sun, a rare feat for her, and moved through her morning ritual with an unusual sense of purpose, a newfound clarity. She brewed her tea, a delicate blend of lavender and chamomile, its comforting aroma usually a source of solace, but this time, it brought no emotional comfort, only a clear, unburdened mind. Her thoughts were sharp, focused, unburdened by the usual pangs of regret or self-doubt that often accompanied her contemplation of her family's demands. She sat at her polished mahogany desk, its surface gleaming in the morning light, a testament to her meticulous nature, and pulled out her old, leather-bound address book. Its pages, worn soft with time, held the names and numbers of a life lived fully, but also a life overshadowed. Her fingers, steady and unhesitating, traced the familiar number of lawyer Arthur Thorne. Arthur had been Dragon's trusted legal counsel for decades, a man of impeccable integrity and discretion, known for his quiet wisdom and unwavering loyalty. He had managed the intricate details of Dragon's vast estate, overseen the establishment of the grandchildren's trust funds, and handled every significant financial transaction Elara had initiated for Kaelin and Seraphina, often with a knowing, concerned glance in Elara's direction. He knew the full extent of her generosity, often advising caution, though he never questioned her motives, respecting her autonomy. Elara dialed the number, her heart beating a slow, steady rhythm, not of anxiety, but of deliberate intent. Arthur answered on the second ring, his voice crisp and professional, instantly recognizable. Thorne Legal, Arthur speaking. Arthur, it's Elara. I apologize for calling so early, but I need to meet with you today. It's urgent, and it's final. Her voice was devoid of emotion, a stark contrast to her usual gentle, often deferential, tone. It was a voice of absolute conviction. Arthur, sensing the gravity in her voice, the uncharacteristic steel beneath the calm, immediately agreed. Of course, Elara. My first available slot is at 10. Does that work for you? Perfectly, Elara replied, a small, grim smile touching her lips, a reflection of the cold resolve within her. The drive to Thorne Legal was short, through familiar tree-lined streets, but it felt momentous, each turn of the wheel a step closer to a new, uncharted future. As she entered Arthur's plush office, she noted the familiar scent of old books and leather, a comforting aroma that grounded her. Arthur rose to greet her, his expression one of immediate concern, his shrewd eyes searching hers. Elara, what's happened? You sound resolute, as I've never heard you before. Elara sat opposite him, her gaze unwavering, her hands clasped calmly in her lap. Arthur, I need to revoke every single financial arrangement I have in place for Kaelin and Seraphina. All of them. Effective immediately. Arthur's eyebrows rose, a rare show of surprise from the seasoned lawyer. He had seen many family disputes, but few as definitive as this. Elara, are you certain? This is a significant step. We're talking about the mortgage on their home, the car leases, Seraphina's business expenses, the children's school fees, even the trust funds you established for the grandchildren. He listed them, item by item, as if to impress upon her the magnitude of her decision. Every single one, Elara affirmed, her voice gaining a steely edge, leaving no room for doubt. The mortgage payments for their Silver Creek home, the monthly lease payments for Kaelin's Range Rover and Seraphina's Mercedes, the operational costs for Seraphina's Chic, the tuition for Marcus's private high school and Clara's elite academy, the payments for their various extracurricular activities, ballet, hockey, equestrian lessons. Even the trust funds, Arthur. I want them frozen, inaccessible until the children reach the age of 25, with strict stipulations that the funds are for their education and true independent living, not for their parents to manage or exploit. I want the children to have a chance to build their own lives, unburdened by their parents' avarice. Arthur leaned back, taking in the full weight of her decision, understanding the years of pain that must have led to this moment. This will cause quite a ripple, Elara. Kaelin and Seraphina's entire lifestyle is predicated on your support. Their personal spending, their credit lines, their social standing, it will all unravel. They will be utterly exposed. Let it, Elara said, a flicker of something akin to cold satisfaction, not vengeance, but a deep, justified calm, in her eyes. She then recounted, in measured tones, devoid of anger but imbued with quiet weariness, the incident at the wedding, the casual dismissal, the public humiliation. She spoke not with rage, but with the quiet resolve of a woman who had finally, irrevocably, reached her breaking point. They view me not as a mother, Arthur, but as an ATM. A personal aide who handles the mundane tasks. I have given them my love, my time, my husband's legacy, and they have squandered it, returning only contempt and ingratitude. No more. I am reclaiming my life, and Dragon's legacy, for myself. Arthur, a shrewd observer of human nature and a loyal friend, saw the depth of her resolve, the unyielding strength that had replaced years of quiet sacrifice. Very well, Elara. I understand completely. We will begin immediately. It will take a few days for all the necessary paperwork to go through, for banks to process the changes, for direct debits to be cancelled. Some of the immediate effects will be felt quickly, others will take time to fully manifest. But rest assured, the process has begun. Over the next few days, a silent, invisible financial earthquake began to rumble beneath Kaelin and Seraphina's seemingly unshakable world, a tremor that slowly but surely escalated into a seismic shock. The first tremor hit Seraphina at her favorite high-end boutique, Prestige Attire, a place where she was a regular, revered customer. She was attempting to purchase a limited edition designer handbag, a frivolous expenditure but one she felt utterly entitled to, a necessary accessory for her next social event. She presented her premium credit card, the one Elara had linked to a joint account for family expenses, which had always been flush with funds. The cashier swiped it, and the machine flashed a dreaded message: transaction declined. Seraphina, mortified, her cheeks flushing with indignation, tried again, then another card, another one Elara funded. All declined. Her carefully constructed facade of composure began to crack. She muttered about a bank error, and left, her socialite pride deeply wounded, imagining the cashier's knowing gaze. She called Kaelin, furious. Something is wrong with Mother Elara's accounts. My card just got declined at Prestige. It's scandalous. Kaelin, equally perplexed, dismissed it as a temporary glitch. She probably just hit a daily limit. Don't worry, it'll sort itself out. Mother is just Mother. A day later, Kaelin experienced his own moment of panic, far from the public eye but no less humiliating. He was at his exclusive golf club, trying to pay his quarterly membership dues, a five-figure sum he barely even thought about. His card, too, was declined. Then, a few hours later, he received an automated notification that his car lease payment had bounced. His mind raced, a cold dread beginning to seep into his carefully curated sense of security. He called his bank, then Elara's bank, but was met with polite but firm refusals to discuss anything, citing client confidentiality. He called Elara, but her phone went straight to voicemail, an unprecedented occurrence. Mother must be out of town, he fumed to Seraphina, trying to rationalize the inexplicable. This is ridiculous. I can't believe she didn't warn us about these issues. The following week, the cracks in their facade widened into chasms, undeniable and terrifying. The private school tuition statements from Marcus and Clara arrived, marked overdue, followed by stern warnings of suspension. The electricity bill for their sprawling mansion went unpaid, threatening disconnection, plunging them into a surprisingly dark and cold reality. Seraphina's boutique received a stern notice from the landlord regarding overdue rent, followed by an eviction threat that sent her into a fit of hysteria. Her suppliers, no longer receiving prompt payment for their designer goods, began demanding cash up front or outright refusing to deliver new inventory. The boutique, once a gleaming symbol of her ambition, began to look increasingly desolate, its windows gathering dust, its shelves empty. Kaelin's golf club revoked his membership, citing non-payment, severing his most important social and business ties. His Range Rover was flagged for repossession, a stark, public humiliation he had always considered impossible. The grandchildren, accustomed to having every whim catered to, every desire fulfilled, began complaining bitterly about not being able to join their friends on an exclusive school trip to Europe or participate in an expensive sports camp. They blamed their parents, who in turn, blamed Elara, their whispers growing louder and more frequent. Panic began to set in, a cold, creeping dread that coiled in their stomachs, replacing their previous indignation. They tried to reach Elara repeatedly, calling her landline, her mobile, sending frantic texts that shifted in tone from bewildered annoyance to desperate pleas, then to thinly veiled threats, and finally, back to tearful begging. Her silence was deafening, a brick wall against their increasingly desperate attempts. Each unanswered call, each declined transaction, chipped away at their illusion of effortless wealth, replacing it with a terrifying reality. The little errands Elara managed, the mundane tasks she handled, were, in fact, the very pillars of their luxurious existence. Without her, they were adrift, facing a financial abyss they had never imagined, never had to contemplate. The stage was set for the inevitable confrontation, a reckoning long overdue. The front door of Elara's home, usually a portal to a serene sanctuary of quiet elegance, was now besieged by a relentless, almost violent pounding. Kaylin and Serafina stood on her porch, their faces contorted with a volatile mixture of fear, indignation, and simmering rage, their carefully curated composure completely unraveled. Kaylin's expensive tie was askew, his imported shirt wrinkled, and Serafina's usually impeccable hair was slightly disheveled, her designer dress looking oddly out of place. They looked, for the first time in Elara's memory, truly desperate, stripped bare of their pretense. Elara, who had anticipated this moment with a quiet certainty, opened the door calmly, her expression unreadable, betraying no emotion. She did not invite them in immediately, simply stood in the doorway, her presence radiating a quiet authority, an unyielding strength that caught them off guard, momentarily silencing their impending outburst. "Mother! What in God's name is going on?" Kaylin exploded, his voice laced with a frantic, almost hysterical edge, his eyes wide with disbelief. "My golf membership has been revoked. My car is being repossessed. Our accounts are empty. Serafina's boutique is about to be shut down." He gestured wildly, his hands trembling. Serafina pushed past Kaylin, her voice rising in a shrill crescendo, bordering on outright hysteria. "And the children's school fees, Elara. What about Marcus and Clara? They're being threatened with expulsion. How could you do this to your own grandchildren? You're ruining their lives." Her eyes, usually calculating and cold, now darted wildly, shimmering with unshed, perhaps feigned, tears. "Don't you love them?" Elara met their frantic gaze with a steady, unwavering stare, her own eyes reflecting a deep, unshakable resolve. "Come in," she said, her voice soft but firm, a quiet command that brooked no argument. She led them into her tastefully appointed living room, a haven of calm. She settled into her favorite armchair, its velvet worn soft with years of use, gesturing to the plush sofa for them to sit. They sank onto the cushions, their bodies tense, their eyes fixed on her as if she held the key to their very survival, their very existence. "I think," Elara began, her voice calm, each word deliberate, measured, weighted with years of silent suffering, "you both know precisely what is going on. I have simply ceased funding your lives." Kaylin scoffed, attempting to regain some semblance of his usual condescending air, a pathetic attempt at bravado. "Ceased funding? Mother, this is ridiculous. It's a temporary glitch, isn't it? A misunderstanding? Did you perhaps forget to transfer funds? Or is your bank having issues with some new system?" His voice pleaded for a convenient lie, a way out. "There is no glitch, Kaylin. No misunderstanding. And my bank is functioning perfectly," Elara countered, her gaze sharpening, unwavering. "I instructed my attorney, Arthur Thorne, to terminate all financial arrangements I had in place for you, effective immediately. The mortgage payments, the car leases, Serafina's business expenses, the children's school fees, their extracurriculars, even the trust funds, all have been either cancelled or frozen. Permanently." A horrified silence descended upon the room, thick and suffocating. Kaylin's jaw dropped, a look of utter disbelief on his face, and Serafina gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with dawning horror. The reality of Elara's words, stark and undeniable, hit them with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from their lungs. But why, mother? Kalen finally stammered, his voice cracking with genuine fear, all pretense of bravado gone. We're your family. Your son. How could you do this to us? To your own flesh and blood? Serafina's eyes filled with crocodile tears, effortlessly summoned, a last desperate attempt at manipulation. Elara, please. Think of the children. They're so young. Their entire future is at stake. You're ruining their lives. Don't you love them? How can you be so cruel? Elara's expression remained serene, betraying no flicker of the deep pain their words used to inflict, a pain she had long since transcended. Love them? I have spent the last decade of my life pouring Dragon's legacy, and my own heart, into ensuring your comfort, your status, your children's supposed future. I have paid for your sprawling mansion in Silver Creek, a house you never truly earned, a property you always flaunted as your own triumph. I covered the substantial down payment and every single monthly mortgage bill, amounting to well over $2 million over the years. That money could have built schools, funded research, or provided comfort for countless others. Instead, it built your gilded cage. She paused, allowing the staggering figures to sink in, but they merely looked aghast, not contrite, their minds still grappling with the loss, not the injustice. I purchased every luxury car you ever desired, Kalen's Porsche, his Range Rover, Serafina's Mercedes, paying not just the hefty down payments but also the exorbitant lease payments and premium insurance, totaling nearly $1 million in vehicles alone. Cars that depreciated the moment you drove them off the lot, providing only fleeting pleasure and superficial status. Elara continued, her gaze unwavering as she turned her attention to her daughter-in-law. Serafina, your boutique, Serafina's Chic, has been a financial black hole, a vanity project that drained my resources. I covered its exorbitant rent in a prime downtown location, totaling over $1 million in lease payments alone. I paid for the initial inventory, the constant restocking of designer items, your lavish marketing campaigns, and even the salaries of your staff. It was never a profitable business, it was a personal shopping allowance disguised as a venture, and it cost me nearly $3 million. A sum that could have funded genuine entrepreneurship, or countless charitable endeavors. Serafina averted her gaze, her face paling, unable to meet Elara's piercing stare, the truth of her frivolous waste laid bare. And the children, Elara said, her voice softening slightly, but the resolve in her eyes remained unyielding. Marcus and Clara. I established comprehensive trust funds for their university education and future independence, depositing nearly $5 million into those accounts. I paid for their elite private school tuition, which, for both of them, amounted to over $200,000 per year. I covered their endless extracurricular activities, Marcus's hockey and equestrian fees, Clara's ballet and piano lessons, their private tutors, their educational trips abroad. I wanted to give them the best, yes, to open doors for them. But you used it as an excuse to abdicate your own responsibilities, to live lives of leisure at my expense, believing I would always be there to clean up your mess. That totaled well over $1 million outside of the trust funds. All of this, without a single genuine gesture of gratitude from either of you. She looked directly at Kalen, her eyes holding years of unspoken hurt. I paid for your expensive golf club memberships, your lavish vacations with Serafina to exotic locales while I sat home alone. Your investments that always seemed to disappear without a trace. All of it. I gave you everything. And what did I receive in return? Kalen opened his mouth to interrupt, to offer another flimsy excuse, but Elara held up a hand, a silent, powerful gesture that silenced him completely. Let me finish. What I received was neglect. Disregard. Condescension. I was excluded from family gatherings, my wisdom dismissed as old-fashioned. I was your ATM, your personal concierge, your silent benefactor whose only purpose was to fund your extravagant lives. And then, at your wedding, Kalen, the event I paid for down to the last sparkling sequin, the culmination of your social aspirations, you introduced me to a guest not as your mother, the woman who sacrificed everything for you, but as your personal aide. Your mother's assistant. Someone who handles the mundane tasks you deem beneath you. Her voice, though still calm, now carried the undeniable weight of years of unspoken pain, of a profound, devastating betrayal. That was the final straw. The ultimate insult. It was a public declaration of how you truly see me, not as a mother, not as a matriarch, but as a servant. A convenient resource to be exploited and then discarded when no longer needed, or even when still needed, simply to assert your dominance. You stripped me of my dignity. Kalen tried a different tactic, his voice shifting from anger to feigned remorse, his eyes welling up with forced tears. Mother, no. You misunderstand. It was a joke. A silly slip of the tongue. I was flustered. You know how much we love you. You're our mother. Our pillar. Our rock. He reached out a hand, as if to touch her, but Alara subtly recoiled. Serafina, seeing Kalen's failure, tried emotional blackmail, her voice a desperate whine. Alara, think about what you're doing. You're destroying your family. You're tearing us apart. How can you be so cruel? We'll be ruined. We'll lose everything. Our children will resent you forever. You will lose what you never earned, Alara stated, her voice unwavering, a voice of absolute, unshakable conviction. You will lose the life I provided for you, not the life you built yourselves. You will learn, finally, what it means to stand on your own 2 feet, to work, to be responsible. I have been a bank, a maid, an assistant, a silent partner, anything but a mother to you for far too long. No more. My funds, and my heart, are closed to you. Kalen tried to plead again, his voice cracking with desperation. Mother, please. We'll do anything. We'll change. We'll be better. We'll spend more time with you, invite you to everything. We'll pay you back. Just turn the funds back on. We can't survive without you. Alara rose from her chair, her stature appearing taller, more formidable, radiating an aura of quiet power that they had never seen, never imagined possible. My decision is final. You have had years, decades, to show me respect, gratitude, genuine affection. You chose instead to treat me as a commodity, a bottomless resource. Now, you will face the consequences of your choices. This is not a negotiation. You have exhausted my generosity, my patience, and my love. You may leave. This house, this life, is no longer burdened by your demands. She walked to the door and opened it, a silent but absolute dismissal, the afternoon light streaming in, illuminating their stunned faces. Kalen and Serafina stood, frozen, their faces a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. They looked at each other, then back at Alara, whose eyes held a resolute finality, a quiet triumph. They had gambled on her endless well of forgiveness, and they had lost everything. They turned and stumbled out of her home, leaving behind a silence that, for Alara, felt not empty, but profoundly, wonderfully free. The weight of years lifted from her shoulders. Kalen and Serafina drove away from Alara's house in stunned, petrified silence, the opulent Range Rover, still technically Alara's property, feeling like a mocking symbol of their crumbling world. The full weight of Alara's words, the cold, irrefutable facts and figures she had laid out, pressed down on them, suffocating them. They were not just facing a temporary inconvenience, a fleeting glitch, they were facing utter financial ruin. Their entire meticulously constructed facade, built on Alara's silent generosity, was about to collapse with a resounding crash, shattering their carefully cultivated social image. The immediate fallout was swift and brutal. Within days, the bank officially initiated foreclosure proceedings on their Silver Creek mansion. The sheer scale of the mortgage payments, now entirely their responsibility, was impossible for them to meet. They had no savings, no investments of their own that weren't already deep in debt. Every penny they had ever acquired had been spent on maintaining a lifestyle they couldn't afford, bolstered by Ilara's endless infusions of cash. The thought of losing the house, the grand symbol of their social standing, filled Serafina with a sickening dread, a cold despair. How would she face her friends? Her social circle, built on appearances and superficial connections, would surely abandon her. Then came the ignominious repossession of Kalen's Range Rover. He had tried to ignore the notices, assuming Ilara would eventually relent, that this was just a ploy, but a tow truck arrived unceremoniously at their driveway in broad daylight, reclaiming the vehicle. Kalen watched, helpless and humiliated, as his prized possession, his symbol of success, was driven away. Serafina's Mercedes followed suit a few days later, leaving them with no means of luxury transport. They were forced to dust off an old, forgotten compact car that had been sitting in their garage for years, a relic from their pre-Ilara benefactor days, a stark downgrade that bruised their egos more deeply than any financial loss. The shame was palpable. Serafina's boutique, Serafina's chic, crumbled rapidly, a house of cards in the wind. With no funds for rent or inventory, the landlord served them a final eviction notice, a stark red letter taped to the glass door. The shelves, once stocked with designer labels, now looked bare and dusty, mirroring the emptiness of Serafina's ambition. The few remaining staff members, unpaid for weeks, walked out, leaving scathing reviews online. Serafina was forced to liquidate whatever she could, selling off remnants of her stock at a fraction of their cost just to cover immediate, paltry expenses. The dream of her stylish empire turned into a humiliating public failure, the gossip spreading like wildfire through her high society circles, leaving her utterly isolated. The children, Marcus and Clara, experienced the most immediate and painful shock. Their elite private school, unaccustomed to unpaid tuition, sent formal letters of expulsion. They were forced to enroll in the local public school, a notion utterly alien and horrifying to them, a world away from their privileged bubble. Their friends, accustomed to their lavish parties and exclusive trips, began to distance themselves, a cruel but predictable reality. Their extracurricular activities, once a staple of their existence, were abruptly cut off. Marcus's hockey team, Clara's ballet lessons, all gone. The children, bewildered and angry, directed their frustration at their parents, who could only offer weak, evasive explanations, crumbling under the weight of their own failures. The cascade of consequences was relentless, a never-ending wave of misery. Credit card companies, seeing their income disappear and their spending habits unchanged, began reducing their credit limits and raising interest rates. Bills piled up, phone services were threatened with disconnection, and the constant hum of their luxurious lives was replaced by the harsh silence of overdue notices and the relentless ring of debt collectors. They moved into a cramped, rented apartment, a stark, humiliating contrast to their former mansion. Kalen and Serafina, who had always relied on manipulation and entitlement, attempted to contact Ilara repeatedly. Their calls and messages became increasingly frantic, shifting from pleas to desperate threats, then back to tearful begging, interspersed with accusations of elder abuse. "Mother, please. We're starving. The children are miserable. Have a heart. Ilara, this is elder abuse. We'll sue you for abandonment. Mom, I'm your son. You can't abandon me." But Ilara's phone remained silent, her resolve unyielding, a concrete wall against their emotional terrorism. She had blocked their numbers, severed all ties, and instructed Arthur Thorne to handle any future communications, ensuring she would not be subjected to their toxic influence again. While their world imploded, Ilara's began to quietly blossom, a vibrant flourishing after a long, dark winter. The morning after the confrontation, after Kalen and Serafina had left, she felt an immense lightness, as if a decades-long burden had finally been lifted from her shoulders. She picked up the phone and called Eleanor, a dear friend from her bridge club, whom she hadn't seen in months, always too busy with Kalen and Serafina's latest demands or too drained to socialize. "Eleanor," she said, her voice bright with a newfound energy, "would you like to join me for lunch? I have some wonderful news, and a decade of catching up to do." Later that week, Elara booked a flight to Florence, Italy, a city she and Dragan had always dreamed of revisiting but never found the time for, always prioritizing Kalen's latest venture or Serafina's next grand event. She spent weeks exploring ancient art galleries, taking hands-on cooking classes in Tuscan villas, and simply sitting in sun-drenched piazzas, sketching the architecture and writing in her journal, allowing her thoughts to flow freely for the first time in years. She purchased a beautiful, vibrant set of watercolor paints and an easel, rekindling a forgotten passion for art that she had put aside years ago, buried under layers of obligation. She returned home rejuvenated, her spirit lighter, her mind clearer than it had been in decades. She enrolled in a local art class, her watercolors improving with each stroke, each creation a testament to her newfound freedom. She joined a book club, engaging in lively discussions with new friends who valued her intellect and experience, not her bank account. She started taking long, leisurely walks in the park near her home, noticing the birdsong, the changing leaves, the subtle beauty of nature, details that had previously been obscured by the constant hum of her children's demands and anxieties. The silence in her home was no longer heavy, it was peaceful, a welcome companion. She cooked for herself, simple, delicious meals, savoring each bite, truly tasting the food for the first time in years. She read for hours, lost in the immersive worlds of her favorite authors, her mind expanding. She spent time tending to her small garden, feeling the cool earth beneath her fingers, nurturing new life, a quiet satisfaction filling her. Elara was not reveling in their downfall, she was simply breathing, truly breathing, for the first time in a very long time. She was reclaiming her life, one peaceful, deliberate step at a time, leaving Kalen and Serafina to face the bitter harvest of their own ingratitude, their own self-inflicted misery. Months passed, turning into a full year, then even more, since the infamous wedding and Elara's decisive act of liberation. The once shimmering world of Kalen and Serafina had completely disintegrated, replaced by a harsh, unforgiving reality. They had been forced to sell their mansion, barely recouping enough to pay off some of their mounting debts, and moved into a cramped, rented apartment in a less desirable part of the city, far from their former social circles. Serafina, her boutique having folded, struggled to find work, her resume filled with boutique owner experience that, without Elara's funding and connections, proved meaningless in the real job market. She eventually took a low-paying retail job at a department store, a stark, humiliating contrast to her former life of leisurely lunches and designer shopping. Kalen, unable to maintain his previous lifestyle and networking contacts, found himself taking on odd jobs, freelance consulting for small, struggling businesses, or even driving for a ride-sharing service, his charm and entitlement proving useless without his mother's financial backing. He even applied for entry-level positions, a concept that would have been unthinkable to his arrogant self a year prior. The grandchildren, Marcus and Clara, had perhaps the most difficult adjustment, their initial shock turning into a lingering resentment. They initially resented their parents and, by extension, Elara, for the sudden upheaval in their lives, for stripping them of their perceived birthright. However, forced into public school and stripped of their lavish privileges, they slowly began to understand the true value of things, beyond their material cost. Marcus, no longer able to rely on elite hockey academies and expensive equipment, discovered a passion for a local, casual soccer league, finding genuine joy in teamwork and camaraderie rather than the pressure of elite competition. Clara, without her endless ballet lessons and private tutors, started volunteering at a local animal shelter, her compassion blossoming in an unexpected direction, finding fulfillment in helping others. They were still navigating their new reality, grappling with their losses, but there was a nascent resilience forming within them, a quiet understanding of the world beyond gilded cages. Their relationship with their parents was strained, burdened by the weight of their resentment and Kalen and Serafina's constant complaints about their fate, their endless blame. Elara, however, was thriving, her life a testament to quiet strength and self-discovery. Her days were now filled with pursuits that truly nourished her soul. The trip to Florence had been a revelation, a catalyst for her transformation. She spent weeks exploring ancient art galleries, taking hands-on cooking classes in Tuscan villas, and simply sitting in sun-drenched piazzas, sketching the architecture and writing in her journal, allowing her thoughts to flow freely for the first time in years. She returned home rejuvenated, her spirit lighter, her mind clearer than it had been in decades. She enrolled in a local art class, her watercolors improving with each stroke, each creation a testament to her newfound freedom. She joined a book club, engaging in lively discussions with new friends who valued her intellect and experience, not her bank account. She started taking long, leisurely walks in the park near her home, noticing the birdsong, the changing leaves, the subtle beauty of nature, details that had previously been obscured by the constant hum of her children's demands and anxieties. Her home, once a silent reminder of her unacknowledged sacrifices, was now a vibrant hub of her own making. She hosted small, intimate dinners with friends, filled with laughter and genuine connection, a stark contrast to the performative gatherings of Kaylin and Serafina. She took up gardening with renewed vigor, her garden blossoming with colorful flowers, a living metaphor for her own life blooming anew. She rediscovered old hobbies and embraced new ones, from learning to play the ukulele to volunteering at a local historical society, finding joy in unexpected places. She managed her finances with quiet satisfaction, knowing that every penny she spent was for her own joy, her own enrichment, her own peace, no longer beholden to anyone else's desires. She had built a life on her own terms, free from the draining demands of her ungrateful family. The pain of the past had receded, replaced by a profound sense of peace and a quiet, unshakable strength. She occasionally heard snippets of news about Kaylin and Serafina through mutual acquaintances, stories of their struggles, their attempts to rebuild lives they had never truly learned how to construct. Elara felt no malice, only a detached understanding, a sense of quiet closure. They were learning, the hard way, the lessons she had tried to teach them through decades of quiet provision, lessons they had stubbornly refused to heed. The universal truth that Elara had painfully learned, and that Kaylin and Serafina were now being forced to confront, was that love and respect cannot be bought. Financial generosity, when divorced from genuine gratitude and reciprocal affection, becomes a mere transaction, a tool for exploitation, breeding only dependence and entitlement. True wealth lies not in the accumulation of material possessions or social status, but in the richness of one's relationships and, most importantly, in one's self-worth and inner peace. Elara had spent years pouring herself into others, neglecting her own needs and desires, eroding her own spirit. Her journey taught her that the greatest act of loyalty, the most profound show of love, is often reserved for oneself. Only by valuing her own peace and dignity could she truly begin to live a life of authentic freedom and happiness, a life truly her own. Thank you for joining us on Elara's incredible journey of reclaiming her life and finding justice. Her story is a powerful reminder that true strength often lies in drawing a firm line and valuing your own worth above all else. If you are moved by Elara's story, you'll find many more tales of justice, resilience, and life lessons right here on our channel. We explore true stories of people who stood up for themselves, navigated complex family dynamics, and found their path to liberation. Don't miss out on more inspiring narratives. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you're always the first to know when a new video drops. We love hearing from you. Elara's experience with ingratitude and exploitation is heartbreaking. Have you ever faced such a profound betrayal or ingratitude from someone you helped? Or if you were in Elara's shoes, what would have been your breaking point? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. Your insights truly enrich our community.